The alarm clock screamed at exactly 6:30 inches the morning, but Maya didn't hear it. She'd been up until 2 a.m. preparing for this day, her first day at the new job. When she finally opened her eyes, the clock showed 7:45. Her heart dropped straight to her stomach. She had exactly 45 minutes to get ready and reach the office downtown. A journey that normally took 35 minutes without traffic. She jumped out of bed like the mattress was on fire. Her carefully ironed clothes were hanging in the closet, a beautiful navy blue dress paired with a cream-colored blazer. But there was a problem. Yesterday evening, while doing her final preparations, she'd spilled coffee all over that dress. In her panic last night, she'd thrown everything into the washing machine and completely forgotten to move them to the dryer before falling asleep. Now those clothes were sitting in the washing machine, soaking wet and completely unwearable. Maya ran to her closet, throwing hangers left and right, searching for something, anything professional to wear. But it was like the universe was playing a cruel joke on her. Everything was either at the dry cleaners or in that useless washing machine. She had casual clothes, weekend clothes, gym clothes, but nothing appropriate for a first day at a corporate office. The minutes were ticking away like bombs. 7:52, 7:53, 7:54. She was running out of time and options. That's when her eyes landed on her favorite tan trench coat hanging by the door. It was elegant, professional-looking, and most importantly, it was long enough to cover everything. A crazy idea formed in her mind. She quickly put on her comfortable cotton pajama top, the one with little flowers on it, and threw the trench coat over it. Looking in the mirror, she actually looked quite professional from the outside. The coat was well-tailored, sophisticated, and completely hid what she was wearing underneath. Nobody would know, right? She'd just keep the coat on, maybe cite the air conditioning being too cold, and after work, she'd rush to buy some proper clothes. Maya grabbed her bag, checked that she had her wallet and phone, and rushed out of the apartment. The morning traffic was surprisingly light, and she made good time on the subway. During the ride, she kept rehearsing her plan. Get to the office, go straight to her desk, keep the coat on, and survive the day. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, she'd be prepared. She arrived at the impressive glass building at 8:42. With 18 minutes to spare before her official start time, the lobby was all marble and chrome, with people in sharp suits walking purposefully in every direction. Maya felt a flutter of nervousness but pushed it down. She was here. She was on time. And she looked professional enough from the outside. The elevator ride to the 15th floor felt like it took forever. When the doors finally opened, she stepped into a modern office space with an open floor plan, glass meeting rooms, and employees already busy at their computers. A friendly woman from HR greeted her and showed her to her desk, which was in a section with 5 other new hires who'd started the previous week. Maya settled into her chair, carefully arranging her coat so it didn't open. She logged into her computer and started going through the training materials that had been left for her. So far, so good. A few colleagues introduced themselves, and she smiled and shook hands, making sure to keep her coat closed with her other hand. Around 9:30, her new supervisor stopped by. Miss Rodriguez was a sharp woman in her late 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She welcomed Maya to the team and said they'd have a proper meeting after lunch to discuss her responsibilities. Maya thanked her, relieved that everything was going smoothly. The office was indeed quite cold with the air conditioning, so her excuse for keeping the coat on seemed perfectly reasonable. One colleague even commented that she was smart to dress warmly because the AC in this building was always set too high. Maya laughed nervously, agreeing wholeheartedly. But around 10:15, just as she was starting to relax and think she might actually pull this off, Miss Rodriguez appeared at her desk again with an unexpected announcement. The CEO had arrived earlier than scheduled and wanted to meet all the new employees right away. There would be an informal gathering in the main conference room in 10 minutes, and everyone should head over. Maya's stomach twisted into knots as she watched her colleagues stand up and start walking toward the conference room. She had no choice but to follow them, her mind racing with worry about what was coming next. The conference room was on the 16th floor, one level up from where Maya worked. As she walked with the group of new employees, she noticed how everyone seemed relaxed and confident. They chatted easily with each other, discussing their first-week experiences and sharing tips about the best lunch spots nearby. Maya tried to join in the conversation, but her mind was elsewhere, fixated on the coat she absolutely could not remove. The conference room was beautiful but had one major problem. It was warm. Very warm. Unlike the freezing office space downstairs, this room had large windows that let in the morning sun, and the heating system seemed to be working overtime. Within minutes of entering, Maya noticed people unbuttoning their jackets and rolling up their sleeves. She took a seat near the back, hoping to blend in and avoid attention. There were about 15 new employees in total, all hired within the past 2 weeks. They sat around a large oval table, and the atmosphere was casual but professional. Miss Rodriguez stood at the front, making small talk while they waited for the CEO to arrive. Then someone from facilities came in and apologized, explaining that the temperature control in this room was broken and stuck on high heat. They were working on it, but it might take a few hours to fix. Several people groaned good-naturedly and started removing their jackets. Maya felt sweat beginning to form on her forehead. Miss Rodriguez glanced around the room and noticed Maya still wearing her coat. With a friendly smile, she walked over. "You might want to take that off," she said kindly. "It's going to get even warmer in here. I know the office downstairs is freezing, but this room is the opposite problem." Maya felt her face turn red. She clutched the edges of her coat and forced a smile. "I'm okay. Thank you. I actually run quite cold. I'm comfortable like this." Miss Rodriguez looked a bit puzzled, but nodded and walked back to the front. However, as the minutes passed and the room got warmer, Maya's discomfort became more obvious. She could feel perspiration on her neck and back. Her face was flushed, and she knew people were starting to notice. Another colleague, a friendly guy named Tom who sat next to her, leaned over. "Seriously? Aren't you dying in that coat? You look like you're melting." Maya laughed awkwardly. "I'm fine, really, just not used to the temperature changes yet." But she wasn't fine. She was miserable and increasingly panicked. The CEO still hadn't arrived, and every minute in that overheated room felt like an hour. She could see Miss Rodriguez glancing her way occasionally, concern evident on her face. Finally, after what felt like forever, the CEO walked in. Mr. Patterson was a tall man in his 60s, with gray hair and a warm smile. He apologized for the delay and the heat, making a joke about the facilities team. Everyone laughed, and the tension in the room eased slightly. He began talking about the company's vision and values, welcoming the new employees and sharing stories about the company's history. Maya tried to focus on his words, but all she could think about was how hot she was and how strange she must look, sitting there in a heavy coat while everyone else was in shirt sleeves. Then came the part she'd been dreading. Mr. Patterson asked each new employee to stand up, introduce themselves, and share a little about their background and what excited them about joining the company. One by one, people stood up, spoke confidently, and sat back down. The introductions were moving around the table, getting closer and closer to Maya. When it was finally her turn, she stood up carefully, making sure her coat stayed closed. She introduced herself, mentioned her previous work experience, and talked about her excitement for this new opportunity. Her voice was steady, but inside she was a mess. As she sat down, she noticed Miss Rodriguez watching her with an expression that had shifted from concern to something else. Understanding, maybe? Or suspicion? The meeting continued, and Mr. Patterson began discussing some upcoming projects and opportunities for new employees to get involved. But then Miss Rodriguez did something unexpected. She stood up and announced that there would be a brief break before continuing. She asked if Maya could step outside with her for a quick moment. Maya's heart hammered in her chest as she followed Miss Rodriguez out of the conference room and into the hallway. This was it, the moment of truth. She couldn't hide anymore, and she had no idea what was about to happen next. Miss Rodriguez turned to face her, and Maya saw something surprising in her expression. It wasn't anger or frustration. It looked almost like amusement mixed with sympathy. Miss Rodriguez closed the conference room door behind them, and the hallway suddenly felt very quiet. Maya stood there, her hands still clutching her coat, trying to think of something to say that wouldn't make this situation even more awkward than it already was. "Look," Miss Rodriguez said gently, "I've been doing this job for 20 years, and I've seen a lot of things. You're clearly uncomfortable. And it's not just because of the heat. Is everything all right?" Maya opened her mouth to give another excuse. But nothing came out. She was tired of lying, tired of being anxious. And honestly, she was so hot in that coat that she couldn't think straight anymore. The words just tumbled out before she could stop them. "I can't take off my coat," she blurted out, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not wearing anything underneath. Well, I mean, I am wearing something, but it's not work appropriate. It's my pajama top." There was a moment of complete silence. Maya wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. She'd just admitted to her new supervisor, on her very first day, that she'd shown up to work in her pajamas. This was it. She was definitely getting fired. She'd probably set some kind of record for the shortest employment in company history. But then something unexpected happened. Miss Rodriguez's serious expression cracked, and a smile spread across her face. Not a mocking smile, but a genuine, warm one. She actually laughed, a kind and understanding laugh that made Maya feel slightly less terrible. "Oh, honey," Miss Rodriguez said, shaking her head. "You should see your face right now. Breathe. You're not the first person to have a wardrobe emergency, and you definitely won't be the last." Maya felt tears of relief and embarrassment pricking at her eyes. "I'm so sorry. I overslept. And all my work clothes were in the washing machine. And I panicked. And I just thought I could make it through one day and nobody would know. But then the CEO meeting happened, and this room is so hot, and I know I look ridiculous, and I completely understand if you want to send me home or if this reflects badly on my judgment." She was rambling now, all her anxiety pouring out in a rush of words. Miss Rodriguez held up a hand to stop her. "First of all, stop apologizing. Second, take a breath. Third, we're going to fix this right now." She pulled out her phone and made a quick call. "Hey, it's Rodriguez. I need a favor. Can you run across to the department store on 5th Avenue? I need a professional outfit. Size medium. Nothing fancy. Just a basic blouse and pants, or a simple dress." "Yes, right now." "I'll explain later. You're a lifesaver. Charge it to my card." Maya stared at her in disbelief. "You don't have to do that. I can just go home and change." "And miss the CEO meeting on your first day?" "Absolutely not, Miss." Rodriguez checked her watch. "My assistant will be back in about 30 minutes. Until then, we're going to make this work." She led Maya down the hallway to her private office, which thankfully had much better temperature control. The space was organized and professional, with awards on the walls and family photos on the desk. Miss Rodriguez gestured for Maya to sit down on the comfortable chair near the window. "Stay here and cool off. I'm going to go back to the conference room and tell them we're taking a longer break. Mr. Patterson won't mind. He's actually very understanding about these things." She paused at the door and turned back. "You know what? Let me tell you a story." She sat down in the chair across from Maya, her expression thoughtful. "About 7 years ago, I had an important presentation for our biggest client. I'd prepared for weeks. Everything was perfect, except on the morning of the presentation, I got dressed in a rush because my daughter was sick and I had to arrange childcare. I showed up wearing 2 completely different shoes, one black, one navy blue. Didn't even notice until I was standing in front of 30 people and someone pointed it out." Maya's eyes widened. "What did you do?" "I made a joke about it, finished my presentation, and we still got the contract. But here's the thing I learned that day. How you handle the mistake matters more than the mistake itself. You could have called in sick today. You could have just not shown up. But instead, you problem solved. You found a solution, and you showed up anyway. That actually tells me something good about your character." Maya felt some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "I was so scared you'd think I was unprofessional." "You want to know what's unprofessional?" "Not showing up and not calling." making excuses and blaming others. You did neither of those things. You made a human mistake, and you tried your best to handle it. Miss Rodriguez stood up and walked to her desk, pulling out a bottle of water from a small refrigerator. She handed it to Maya. Drink this. Cool down. In about 20 minutes, you'll have proper clothes, and we'll go back to that meeting like nothing happened. Should I explain to everyone what happened? Maya asked nervously. Miss Rodriguez thought about it for a moment. That's up to you. But if I were you, I'd keep it simple. The fewer people who know about your pajama top, the better. We'll just say you weren't feeling well and needed a moment. Which is technically true. You weren't feeling well in that hot room. Oh, Maya nodded, grateful beyond words. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes while Maya sipped the cold water and felt her body temperature returning to normal. The relief of not having to hide anymore was overwhelming. True to her word, Miss Rodriguez's assistant arrived 28 minutes later with a shopping bag. Inside was a lovely gray blouse and black pants, both in Maya's size, plus a simple pair of flats, since Maya had mentioned her feet were hurting from rushing that morning. Maya changed quickly in the private bathroom attached to Miss Rodriguez's office. The new clothes fit perfectly, and for the first time that day, she felt like herself again. She folded her trench coat neatly and left it on the chair in the office, making a mental note to retrieve it later. Looking at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the stressed, panicked woman from an hour ago. Now she looked calm, professional, and ready to face whatever came next. When she stepped out, Miss Rodriguez looked up from her computer and smiled approvingly. Much better. See? Crisis solved. Now let's get back to that meeting before Mr. Patterson thinks we've abandoned him. They walked back to the conference room together, and Maya felt a strange mix of gratitude and nervousness. Miss Rodriguez had been incredibly kind. But the day wasn't over yet. There was still the rest of the meeting to get through, and Maya couldn't shake the feeling that somehow, someone would find out about her embarrassing secret. When they entered the conference room, the temperature had finally been fixed, and the space was much more comfortable. Mr. Patterson was in the middle of telling a story about the company's early days, and everyone seemed relaxed and engaged. Maya slipped back into her seat, and Tom gave her a curious look. You okay? He whispered. You were gone for a while. Yeah, just needed a moment. All good now, Maya whispered back, grateful that he didn't push for more details. The meeting continued smoothly for the next 20 minutes. Mr. Patterson talked about upcoming projects, company culture, and opportunities for growth. Maya tried to focus on every word, taking mental notes, and genuinely feeling excited about being part of this team. Maybe, just maybe, this disaster of a morning would end on a positive note. But then something happened that made her stomach drop all over again. Tom, who'd been friendly and chatty all morning, raised his hand during the question and answer portion of the meeting. Mr. Patterson called on him, and Tom stood up with a grin. I just want to say, Mr. Patterson, that I'm really impressed with the company's professional standards and the emphasis on presentation and judgment. It's clear that everyone here takes their role seriously. He paused, and Maya felt a chill run down her spine. She knew what was coming. Which is why I was a bit surprised earlier when one of our new colleagues was sitting in a business meeting wearing a coat in an overheated room, clearly uncomfortable but refusing to dress appropriately for the situation. I'm just wondering how that aligns with the professional image we're supposed to project. The room went completely silent. Every head turned to look at Maya. Her face burned with humiliation, and she felt her hands start to shake. Tom wasn't looking at her directly, but it was obvious who he was talking about. She'd been the only one wearing a coat. Mr. Patterson's expression shifted from friendly to serious. He looked at Tom, then at Maya, then back at Tom. That's an interesting observation, he said slowly. And since you've brought it up in this forum, I think it's only fair that we address it directly. Maya, would you like to respond to this concern about your professionalism and judgment? Maya felt like the walls were closing in. This was the moment she'd been dreading all day. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, waiting to hear what she would say. Part of her wanted to run out of the room and never come back. But another part of her, the part that had gotten her through every difficult challenge in her life, told her to stand up and face this head on. She stood slowly, her legs feeling shaky but her resolve growing stronger. She looked at Mr. Patterson, then let her gaze sweep across the room, meeting the eyes of her new colleagues. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter than she would have liked, but it was steady. "You're absolutely right to question it," she began. And she saw surprise flicker across Tom's face. He probably expected her to make excuses or get defensive. "This morning, I made a mistake. Actually, I made several mistakes. I overslept on my first day because I stayed up too late preparing. I ruined my work clothes and forgot to dry my backup outfit. And instead of calling to explain the situation or asking for help, I tried to hide the problem." She paused, taking a breath. The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. "I wore that coat because underneath it, I wasn't dressed appropriately for an office. I thought I could make it through the day without anyone noticing. But obviously, that didn't work out." When Miss Rodriguez realized what was happening, she helped me fix the situation quickly and discreetly. Maya felt her confidence growing as she spoke. The truth was actually easier than all the lies and hiding had been. "So yes, my judgment this morning was not great. I should have been honest from the start. But I did show up. I was on time despite everything going wrong. And when I realized I couldn't hide the problem anymore, I told the truth and accepted help. I learned something important today about the difference between trying to appear perfect and actually solving problems." She looked directly at Tom now. "I appreciate you raising this concern because it gives me the chance to address it openly rather than having people wonder or gossip about it later. I made a mistake, I owned it, and I fixed it. That's the best I can do." When she sat down, her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. There was a moment of silence that felt like it lasted forever. Then Mr. Patterson did something unexpected. He started clapping, slowly at first, then joined by Miss Rodriguez, and then by others around the table. Not everyone was clapping. Tom certainly wasn't. But enough people were that Maya felt a wave of relief wash over her. Mr. Patterson waited for the applause to die down before speaking. "That," he said, pointing at Maya, "is exactly the kind of response I want to see from people on my team. Not perfection. Not excuses, but honesty, accountability, and the ability to learn from mistakes." He turned to look at Tom. "And as for professional standards, let me be very clear about something. Professionalism isn't about catching people in their worst moments and calling them out publicly. It's about how we treat each other when things go wrong." The rest of the meeting passed in a blur for Maya. She barely heard what was said next. All she knew was that somehow, impossibly, she'd survived the worst day of her professional life, and she was still employed. The meeting ended around noon, and people began filing out of the conference room in small groups. Maya gathered her notebook and pen, still processing everything that had just happened. She felt emotionally exhausted, like she'd run a marathon rather than just sat through a business meeting. Miss Rodriguez caught up with her in the hallway. "That took courage," she said quietly. "I'm proud of how you handled that. Not many people could have responded so well under pressure." "I just told the truth," Maya said, though she knew it had been harder than that. "What else could I do?" You'd be surprised how many people would have made excuses, blamed the air conditioning, claimed a medical condition, anything to avoid admitting a simple mistake. You chose the harder path, and it made all the difference. Miss Rodriguez checked her watch. "Why don't you take a proper lunch break? You've earned it. Come back around 1:30, and we'll go over your actual job responsibilities. Today's been unusual enough without throwing real work at you too." Maya thanked her and headed back down to the 15th floor to grab her purse. When she got to her desk, she found a note stuck to her computer monitor. Her heart sank, thinking it might be something mean from Tom or another colleague who'd judged her harshly. But when she unfolded it, she found a kind message from another new employee named Lisa. "Hey, Just wanted to say I thought you were really brave in there. On my first day at my last job, I spilled coffee all over my boss's white shirt during a meeting. These things happen. Looking forward to working with you, Lisa. Maya smiled, folding the note carefully and putting it in her purse. Maybe this place wouldn't be so bad after all. She decided to take Miss Rodriguez's advice and go out for lunch. The fresh air and sunshine felt wonderful after the stress of the morning. She found a quiet cafe a few blocks away and ordered a sandwich and coffee. While she ate, she thought about everything that had happened. The panic, the fear, the humiliation, but also the kindness from Miss Rodriguez, the unexpected support from some of her colleagues, and most importantly, the lesson she'd learned about honesty. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend asking how the first day was going. Maya laughed out loud, causing a few people in the cafe to glance her way. How could she even begin to explain this day? She typed back, "Long story. Very long story. Tell you tonight. But I think it's going to be okay." When she returned to the office at 1:30, she found Miss Rodriguez waiting at her desk with a stack of folders and a warm smile. They spent the next 2 hours going over Maya's actual job responsibilities, the project she'd be working on, and the team structure. It felt good to focus on normal work things instead of wardrobe disasters and public confessions. Around 4 o'clock, Mr. Patterson stopped by their area. Maya's heart skipped a beat when she saw him. But he simply wanted to check in on all the new employees and see how they were settling in. When he got to Maya's desk, he paused and spoke quietly so only she and Miss Rodriguez could hear. "I meant what I said in that meeting," he told her. "We value people who can handle adversity with grace. You showed that today. But I also want to give you a piece of advice, if you're willing to hear it." "Of course," Maya said, sitting up straighter. "In the future, when something goes wrong, especially on a personal level, don't hesitate to make a simple phone call. A 5-minute conversation explaining an emergency situation will always be better than trying to hide a problem. We're all human here. We understand that life happens." He smiled kindly. "But your instinct to show up despite the difficulties, that's valuable. Just remember that honesty and communication are part of showing up too." Maya nodded, feeling grateful for the constructive feedback. "I will. Thank you for understanding today. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to see how you handle pressure. That's worth more than any interview question could tell me." He nodded to both of them and continued his rounds. The rest of the afternoon passed smoothly. Maya completed her initial training modules, set up her email signature, and even had a friendly chat with a few colleagues who stopped by to introduce themselves properly. Tom kept his distance, which was fine with Maya. She wasn't interested in holding grudges, but she also wasn't going to go out of her way to befriend someone who'd tried to embarrass her publicly. At 5:30, as people began packing up to leave, Miss Rodriguez came by one last time. She handed Maya a garment bag. "Your coat. Don't forget it." Maya took it, running her hand over the familiar fabric. "I think I'm going to keep this as a reminder," she said. "A reminder that sometimes our worst moments can teach us the most important lessons." "That's a good perspective to have," Miss Rodriguez agreed. "Although maybe also keep a spare outfit in your desk drawer from now on." "Just as a backup plan?" Maya laughed, already planning to bring one tomorrow. As she rode the subway home that evening, Maya reflected on the strangest first day of work she could have ever imagined. She'd started the morning in a panic. Convinced her career was over before it began, she'd hidden, lied, sweated through a meeting, been called out publicly, and had to confess everything in front of her new CEO and colleagues. But she'd also experienced unexpected kindness, learned the value of honesty, discovered that mistakes don't have to define you, and found out that the right workplace will value your character over your perfection. Most importantly, she'd learned that showing up, even when things go wrong, was always better than not showing up at all. When she got home, she immediately moved her clothes from the washing machine to the dryer, set 3 alarms for the next morning, and laid out her outfit for the next day. Then she called her best friend and told her the whole ridiculous, embarrassing, ultimately hopeful story. 6 months later, Maya would be assigned to lead a major project for the company. A year later, she'd be promoted. And 5 years later, When she was training new employees, she'd tell them the story of her first day, the trench coat, and the pajama top. Not to embarrass herself, but to teach them that everyone makes mistakes. What matters is how you handle them. And that honesty and courage will take you further than trying to appear perfect ever could.